Okay, so let us begin. So today is November 7th, and we do 3 bows to the Buddha. 1, 2, 3. And we'll do the homage to the Buddha. And let me mute all the participants. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay, good morning, everybody. Okay, so today's class will be continuing or taking off from where we left off last week. So last week we looked at sutta in the Anguttara Nikaya, the Book of Fours, sutta number 170, in which the Venerable Ananda speaks about 4 approaches that different disciples have taken to the attainment of arhatship. And of these 4, the most important, the most general ones, first there is the approach in which samatha comes first, followed by insight or vipassana. And then there's another approach in which vipassana comes first, followed by samatha. So those are the first 2. The third is bringing samatha and vipassana together. Well, let's do it this way. Samatha followed by vipassana, vipassana followed by samatha, and then the third is cultivating samatha and vipassana in conjunction. Okay, so the suttas that we're going to take today deal with, again, with different approaches in bringing together, balancing samatha and vipassana. And so we start with Anguttara Nikaya, Book of Fours, Sutta number 92. So what we're going to see is that these suttas unfold in a sequence in which one elaborates more fully on the preceding one. Each following one elaborates on the preceding ones. And so here the Buddha speaks about 4 kinds of persons found in the world, or you could say 4 kinds of practitioners. And so first there's a person who gains internal serenity of mind, but not the higher wisdom of insight into phenomena. Another person gains the higher wisdom of insight into phenomena, but not internal serenity of mind. The third person gains neither. And then the fourth gains both internal serenity of mind and the higher wisdom of insight into phenomena. And what's interesting in this sutta, we find that the terms that he usually used in the suttas, simply samatha and vipassana, are, in place of those terms, more elaborate expressions are used. Are you able to see my screen in a satisfactory way? Sufficient?
Yes, Bhante.
Okay.
Yes.
The size is sufficient. Okay, so here are the key terms that he used. I'm going to copy these terms and paste them into a Word document. So instead of the simple word samatha, here the sutta uses the more elaborate expression, ajitang cheto samatha. And so the word ajitang is actually originally adi plus atang. And atang is the word that means self. And adi in this case would give the, so it has a nuance of in relation to oneself. So usually we translate it as internally, personally, for oneself. Then of course the word cheto means of the mind. So it's related to the word chitta, or the word that's actually used is chetas, that which pertain of the mind. And then the word samatha, there's some misunderstanding about the word samatha. Sometimes people think the word samatha and the word samadhi are related to each other, directly related to each other. But actually the two words are, by terms of their origin, completely different. The word samatha comes from the root sam, which in Sanskrit is sam. What in Sanskrit it's sham. And this has the meaning of peace or calmness. And it's from the same root sam that we get the word santi, or Sanskrit shanti, meaning peace. And we also get with the prefix upasama, the calming down, the tranquilizing. And then we have another word, sama, without any prefix, also meaning peace. And then the suffix ta just gives the sense of the state of peace, the state of calmness, state of tranquility. And so I render it as serenity. And it's very different from the word samadhi. Yes, the word samatha comes from the root sam, whereas the word samadhi comes from the root da, which means to place or to put. And then to this root, two prefixes are added. Sam, the prefix sam, which gives the nuance of together. It's a little bit, the prefix sam in Pali and Sanskrit is a little bit like the prefix kam or kan in English. Like we have a committee. Committee is a coming together of people into a group. Communication, conveying information between people, bringing people together through transferring information. And then we have the word concentration, which is used to render samadhi. So the kam corresponds to sam. And then it has another prefix, a, which also gives a sense of coming together. So from sam plus a plus da, then we get a verb, samadhyati, which means to place together, to bring together, literally to put together. But in Buddhist meditative terminology, it comes to take on the meaning of to bring the mind into a state of concentration or absorption. And then from this verb, we get the noun samadhi, the state of absorption, the state of concentration, the state of mental unification. Whereas from this verbal root sam, we get a verb. In Sanskrit, it would be shamyate. I think it's shamyate. But in Pali, it becomes sammati, to calm down, to settle down, to become peaceful. Okay, so this is the explanation of the word samatha here. So we have ajitang, internal, cheto, of the mind, samatha, tranquility, calmness, peacefulness, or serenity. So internal serenity of the mind. Okay, then the other term, it's an interesting and rather complex compound. This is adipanya dhamma vipassana. So usually in the suttas, we have the counterpart of samatha is vipassana, but here it's elaborated by way of two compounds brought together, adipanya. And the key word here is panya. You could underline this. Well, this doesn't show. Bold. So panya is what we usually translate as wisdom, and the prefix adi gives an elevated sense, maybe here the sense of a higher wisdom. And then this higher wisdom is conjoined with Dhamma vipassana. So the word vipassana comes from pasana, which means seeing, and vi gives the nuance of a special way of seeing or an exceptional way of seeing. So this is a special way of seeing, and what one is seeing into are dhammas, phenomena. So we translate this whole expression, the higher wisdom of insight, into phenomena. And so for the Buddha's path to be brought to its completeness, the meditative path, one needs some combination, some conjunction or harmonization of these two factors. Samatha, which is the factor of calming the mind down by focusing the mind upon an object in order to settle the waves of thought, to settle the little disturbances. And particularly the task of samatha is to overcome the hindrances to meditative absorption. So we say the task of samatha is to overcome the hindrances. So we speak, the Buddhist texts speak about 5 hindrances: sensual desire, ill will, dullness and drowsiness, restlessness and remorse or regret, and doubt. And so the practice of samatha aims at overcoming these hindrances. And the way this is done is by focusing the mind upon an object that is conducive to the attainment of samadhi, of concentration. So what kind of objects are conducive to the attainment of samadhi? Yeah, in the Visuddhimagga and the commentaries, sometimes a list of 40 objects are mentioned. or sometimes 38 objects. But of these various objects, the ones that are easiest to use on a practical basis, at least in my own experience, the one that maybe could serve the primary uh, uh, yeah, the ones that are primarily useful for focusing the mind would include the in and out breathing. And then there's a group of objects that are called kasinas. I think I've spoken about these before, or maybe I did this during the Abhidhamma retreat. So these would be objects like maybe of the different kasinas, the two that are most commonly used within the meditative traditions, especially in the forest monasteries. One is the earth kasina, which will be a disc that one prepares using clay or mud. Actually, clay is better, reddish brown clay, to represent the earth. So one takes a band, a wooden band or a metal band formed into a circle, and then one fills the inside of that band with clay, smoothing it out. One has to make it very smooth, and sets it up in front of one. And one just focuses the mind, first with the eyes open, on the clay disc, thinking just earth, 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 until the mind is able to visualize the disc representing the earth, to visualize it inwardly as clearly, and to see it inwardly as clearly as one could see it with the eyes open, as one could see the actual physical disc filled with the clay. So that's one of the most popular kasinas. The kasinas are not used, I have to say, that they're not used very commonly, but whenever they are used, the two that are most often used would be the earth kasina or a color kasina. And the color kasina can be blue, red, yellow, or white. So in this case, one would cut out a circular disc, maybe of cardboard or wood, plywood, and then one would have it painted blue, red, yellow, or white, and then set it up in front of one, and then go on first with the eyes open, focusing on the kasina object. Again, using the power of thought, just mentally repeating blue, 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 or red, 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 and so on, until one could mentally visualize the colored kasina as clearly as one could see the object with one's eyes open. Then one goes on focusing on the mentally constructed object, the mentally visualized object, until the mind becomes absorbed into samadhi on the kasina object. So we have the breathing, the kasinas, and then what I found useful, especially for people with a more devotional temperament, is a Buddha Rupa, an image of the Buddha. So one can take a beautiful, inspiring image of the Buddha and go on just focusing on that image, using as a word for anchoring the mind on the object. One could use Buddho, Buddho, or Bhagava, 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 trying to visualize, first using it, keeping the eyes open and looking at the image of the Buddha. And then when one gets a very clear visual image of the Buddha, then one can close the eyes and try to visualize the image with one's eyes closed. In a way, this works on the same principle as the Kasina, but here one is using a figure of the Buddha rather than a circular disc. Okay, so these are ways, the Visuddhimagga mentions numerous other objects, but in my experience, those other objects involve too much discursive thought, so I don't find them as conducive to the unification of the mind as these objects. Because with these objects, one is simply fixing the mind on the object, and otherwise one doesn't have to think about it. Okay, so these are the objects of samatha meditation aimed at unification of the mind. And the object of the vipassana meditation are dhammas. And dhammas here would be all of the phenomena of body and mind that are comprised within the five aggregates. And we're going to elaborate on this more as we go through these suttas. And so we have this expression, adipanya dhamma vipassana. So one does insight contemplation. The way I understand the relation of these two expressions within this complex compound, we do the insight contemplation on dhammas, the phenomena, bodily and mental phenomena. And when that insight reaches a certain degree of depth, strength, and maturity, then it becomes adipanya. Then it becomes the higher wisdom. So it's not yet, when you start beginning vipassana, we can call it adipanya. We can call it the higher wisdom. But when the insight reaches the deep stages of the insight knowledges, then it becomes adipanya, the higher wisdom. In the Book of Threes in the Anguttara Nikaya, we find the term adipanya used. Yeah, I had that here. And here, the word, the Buddha is speaking about the training in the higher wisdom. So it raises the question, what is the training in the higher wisdom? And he says, here the monk understands as it really is. This is dukkha, suffering. This is the origin of suffering. This is the cessation of suffering. This is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. So here the higher wisdom is the direct seeing of the Four Noble Truths. In that seeing of the Four Noble Truths, that is the distinctive mark of the attainment of stream entry. So that is a much higher stage in the development of wisdom than the mere insight into phenomena. But we could say that it is the insight into phenomena, into dharmas, that culminates in this higher wisdom of the seeing of the Four Noble Truths. Okay, so this is the first sutta in this group of three. Let me go back and try to find it. Okay, so here the Buddha simply lays out the four possibilities. And you could see, well, actually we'll see this in the next sutta. So Book of Fours, number 93, here the Buddha again mentions the four types of persons. And then he goes on to give some further instructions in relation to each. So he says, the person among these who gains the internal serenity of mind but not the higher wisdom of insight into phenomena, should base himself on internal serenity of mind and then make an effort to gain the higher wisdom of insight. Then sometime later, he gains both internal serenity of mind and the higher wisdom of insight into phenomena. So the person that's mentioned here as the first of these four possibilities here, this would correspond in sutta number 170. This would be the person who gains samatha first, serenity first, and then goes on to develop and to acquire insight. And you can see in this expression used here, one uses that serenity of mind as the basis, the foundation for gaining the higher wisdom of insight into phenomena. In fact, this is like the usual model or the standard model of the Buddhist path. So first one gains some degree of samadhi, one gains the concentrated mind, and then one uses the concentrated mind to start looking into, investigating, examining the constituent phenomena of the body and mind until through that investigation, insight arises. And then one brings together samadhi and insight in order to deepen the insight until one makes the breakthrough to the world transcending attainment, to the arising of the path. Okay, the second type of person here, one who gains the higher wisdom of insight, but not internal serenity of mind, should base himself, or I should say herself, on the higher wisdom of insight and make an effort to gain internal serenity of mind. So this would be the type of person that I spoke about last week, who probably begins not by practicing these meditations that are designed to focus the mind upon a single object in order to gain samadhi, but one begins by noting as they're occurring in the present, noting, observing, mindfully observing the changing phenomena of body and mind, the changing bodily and mental phenomena, noting them as they're occurring with increasing degrees of subtlety, increasing degrees of precision, with ever increasing continuity and consistency. So this noting of the changing bodily and mental phenomena, we could say it's not the insight knowledge itself, but it is the practice designed to generate insight. And so one notes whatever is occurring in the present. If one is breathing in, one is noting the different phases and stages of the breath, rather than just focusing upon the general impression of the breath. If one is observing the rising and falling of the abdomen, one is noting the different stages in the arising, the pause at the end of the arising, the different phases of the falling movement. Then if sensations arise in the body, pain, one notes the pain, tingling, one notes the tingling, hot flashes, waves of coolness, one notes these. If there's sound externally, one notes hearing. Different thoughts arise, one notes thinking. So one is noting the changing phenomena, but noting everything with precision just as it's occurring. And so in this way, one is gaining a continuous, consistent, mindful attention to the changing bodily and mental phenomena. And that is the kind of preliminary stage of insight. And as that mindful noting of the ever-changing phenomena takes place moment after moment after moment, the mind becomes settled and focused on the ever-changing bodily and mental phenomena. And that settling of the mind on the changing phenomena is a kind of serenity. It's a kind of samadhi. It's a bit different from the samadhi that is achieved when one just focuses upon a single object to the exclusion of everything else. But it keeps the mind focused on the object, settled on the object, and dispels the five hindrances. And in that approach to meditation, sometimes the hindrances will arise. And so whenever the hindrances arise, sensual desire, ill will, drowsiness, restlessness, as soon as it arises, one just notes it as a mental phenomena and then lets it go. So this is mentioned actually in the Satipatthana Sutta. So there's a section in the contemplation of phenomena on the five hindrances. So when sensual desire arises, the meditator knows there has arisen in me sensual desire. When ill will arises, one notes there is ill will in me, and so for the others. And when you note the object, then that object stops dominating and governing the mind. But that particular hindrance turns into an object of the mind. It's noted, recognized simply as a mental phenomena, which occurs briefly for a moment. And then when you note it, then it vanishes on its own. Okay, so here one uses this higher wisdom of insight into phenomena as the basis for gaining serenity of mind. And as the insight goes into the deeper stages of insight knowledge, as they're detailed in a work like Visuddhimagga, then the power of concentration increases in proportion to the depth of the insight. So some of the meditation teachers, and I don't really agree with this, but they have coined the expression vipassana jhanas. I think it was U Pandita Soyador, or perhaps his teacher, Mahasi Soyador, who coined the expression, the vipassana jhanas, to indicate that in the stages of insight knowledge, the deeper stages, the mind becomes concentrated to a degree corresponding to the concentration in the jhanas, but not exactly the same. But in my opinion, this expression confuses the two types of meditation. And so I don't agree with its usage, but I just mention it because some people might have picked up that expression elsewhere. Okay, so this is how one bases oneself on insight to develop that internal serenity of mind. Okay, then the person who acquires neither serenity of mind nor the insight into phenomena should put forth, here the Buddha gives special emphasis to this, should put forth extraordinary desire, effort, zeal, enthusiasm, mindfulness, and clear comprehension to obtain both of those desirable qualities. And he illustrates this with the famous simile of a person whose clothes are on fire or whose maybe he's wearing a turban and the turban is on fire. And so that person would make an extraordinary effort to extinguish that fire. And so if one obtains neither serenity nor insight, one should make that dedicated effort to obtain both of those qualities. And then the person who obtains both serenity and insight should base himself or herself on these two qualities and develop them further in order to reach the destruction of the taints. The destruction of the taints this is asava kaya. So this is the destruction of the defilements, and this is in effect another term for arhatship. And so we could see that the ideal is to have some conjunction, some combination of serenity or samadhi and insight or wisdom. And both of these qualities are critical in obtaining the final goal of the Buddha's path, the destruction of the taints, the destruction of the defilements. An interesting question that sometimes comes up: why is it that some people sort of have a natural disposition towards serenity, but have a hard time gaining insight and have to make special effort to gain insight? For other people, insight or wisdom comes naturally or somewhat easily, but they have to put forward an extra effort to gain serenity of mind. And meditation teachers have noticed that there's just this natural difference in the temperaments and faculties of meditators. So some people, if they start off meditation, I've heard of cases like this, somebody learns mindfulness of breathing, and they do a little practice, or maybe they do an intensive retreat based on mindfulness of breathing, and quite easily they could focus the mind and even gain samadhi, even to the level of jhanas, but they have to work very hard to gain insight, to gain the insight knowledges. Sometimes a subtle attachment to that samadhi develops. And so when it enjoys the bliss, the tranquility, the rapture of the samadhi, and one doesn't want to break away from that absorption in order to contemplate the changing, impermanent phenomena of body and mind. Other people have made a very determined effort. They start off maybe trying to follow the standard model, develop samadhi first, then insight. So they start off with a meditation practice aimed at samadhi and don't have much success with it. But as soon as they maybe connect with a teacher of insight meditation and just learn to note and to observe the changing phenomena of the body-mind process, then naturally and quite spontaneously, the mind can follow the changes very consistently and continuously, and then the insight knowledges start to arise. So why do people have these differences? The only explanation I could come up with is that this difference is based probably on different modes of practice in previous lives. Some people might have been yogis dedicated to the practice of samadhi, maybe even attained the jhanas in past lives. And so naturally, their mind in this life tends to the practice of samatha meditation. Other practitioners may have practiced insight meditation in previous lives, and so they have what we call vasanas, that is, mental dispositions to the practice of insight meditation. And so we have to train ourselves, well, first to strengthen the quality that we are naturally good in, but we have to balance that quality with the quality that we might be deficient in. And so when we bring together some degree of serenity and insight, then we can progress towards the world transcending path and then go into the stages of stream entry, once returning, non-returning, and then reach the final stage, the destruction of the taints. Okay, so this is sutta number 93. I'm going to finish number 94, then we'll take questions. Since, as I said, each sutta elaborates further on the preceding one. So sutta number 94 is the last one in this sequence. And so again, we have the 4 types of persons are enumerated, the same heading. And now comes the instructions. And I'm actually going to start off with type number 2 for elaboration. So here we have the one who gains the higher wisdom of insight, but not internal serenity of mind. And so the advice the Buddha gives is that this practitioner should approach a person who gains internal serenity of mind, that is somebody who has maybe mastered the practice of samatha meditation, maybe somebody who is reputed to be an attainer of the jhanas, or at least who has some skills in practicing of serenity. And what's interesting here are the questions that should be asked and the answers that should be given. So the questions: how should the mind be steadied? How should the mind be composed? How should the mind be unified? How should the mind be concentrated? And then the teacher should explain the way he has experienced it himself, saying the mind should be steadied in such a way, composed in such a way, unified in such a way, and concentrated in such a way. You know, the commentary just says the mind should be steadied, composed, unified, and concentrated by way of the first jhana, then the second jhana, third jhana, fourth jhana. But I want to take the Pali text here, since that reveals more than the English translation can reveal. You know, we have keywords here which are translated, let's see how translated: steadied, composed, unified, and concentrated. So santape tabbang is what's translated should be steadied. Sunni sa de tabbang, translated should be composed. A kodi kattabang is what's translated should be unified, and samadhahatabang is what is translated should be concentrated. When we look at the Pali words, we can see something interesting here that you miss from the English translation. First, the word santapettabang. Now, this word is based on the root ta. And in Sanskrit, the word is sta. And you could see that since Sanskrit and English are distant relations, and so the word sta is connected with certain English words. Steady, stable, stand. Yeah, so we have tapettabang. So this is literally would be made to stand. And maybe the prefix sun here gives a sense of thoroughness. Made to stand still. Literally it would be, how can the mind be made to stand still? And then the word nisad, sannisadetabang, again has the prefix sun. So we put, this is sun plus ta, and then we get this form made to stand still. So this word is based on the same prefix sam plus another prefix ni plus a root sad. And sad is also related to certain English words. Sit and seat. And maybe even, I'm not sure of this, maybe even the word settle. And so when we have this word sannisadetabang, the idea is, how can the mind be made to sit down or to settle down on the object? And so you could see that there's a deliberate progression of stages here. It's like you might be walking. So walking would be like the mind that's roaming and wandering from, well, let's say wandering, not simply walking, but you're wandering. So this is like the untrained mind wandering from thought to thought, jumping from thought to thought, a little bit like the monkey in the forest jumping from tree to tree. But then you want to stop your wandering. And so the first thing you do is you stand still. So that would be like corresponding to what takes place here. In training the mind, you move from the wandering or roaming mind. The first task is to make the mind stand still. But then once the mind stands still, just like when you're walking, after you're standing still, it's even standing is a little bit of a coarse posture. So you want to settle down to a more peaceful posture, and then you sit down or settle down. And this would be like the stage of sannisadetabang. So with this stage, santapetabang, in this stage, we could say one fixes the mind on the object to prevent the mind from roaming and wandering. But once the mind becomes more familiar with the object, then it settles down on the object. That would be the stage of Sanni Sade Tabang. Here in this translation, the word composed is used. Oops. How should the mind be composed? But maybe a more adequate translation would be, how can the mind be settled or made to sit down, to become still on the object? Okay, then the third term that's used, we have a kodi katabam. So a kodi has the sense of one point. And so in this stage, one has moved simply from settling the mind upon the object, and now one is unifying the mind on the object. So the mind is getting more and more focused on the object. And then so here we could say is becoming focused on the object. You can say that this is steady the object. Second stage is settled on the object. And the third stage, focused or even unified on the object. Then the fourth stage that's mentioned, samadha hatabam. So this is related to the word samadhi. So this is the point where one moves from simply being unified or focused, consistently focused on the object, to actually becoming absorbed in the object. And it's that absorption in the object that marks the attainment of samadhi. So these are the kind of skills, the progression of skills that is necessary, that one has to pass through in order to gain that internal serenity of mind. Okay, now we can go back to the first type of person. So here we have the questions to be asked in regard to the insight meditation. So the questions, how should conditioned phenomena be seen? How should they be explored? How should they be discerned by insight? And again, let us take the Pali expressions. And then the answer is, he explains, the teacher explains, conditioned phenomena should be seen in such a way, explored in such a way, discerned by insight in such a way. And so here we have three terms or expressions he used. First, the word sankhara here, which is translated as conditioned phenomena. The word sankhara refers to all conditioned phenomena, so everything comprised within the five aggregates: bodily form, feeling, perceptions, mental formations, consciousness, or the 6 sense faculties, their respective objects, and the corresponding types of consciousness. So all conditioned phenomena. But we have 3 terms indicating the different aspects of the practice, the way they are to be seen, the way they are to be investigated or explored, and the way they are to be seen by insight. The commentary, just explains these terms almost all in the same way. It says that they should be seen as impermanent, explored as impermanent, and discerned with insight as impermanent. And so too is suffering and non-self. But it seems to me that perhaps there are stages here, and this is just my own conjecture. It's not supported by the commentary. But I would say that with dattva, which literally means to be seen, but at this stage, one gains the correct conceptual or intellectual understanding of how to explore condition or how to investigate conditioned phenomena. So here maybe the teacher will explain that conditioned phenomena could be seen as the 5 aggregates, and then explains you should see the 5 aggregates as impermanent, as connected with suffering, and as non-self. So at this stage, one gains an intellectual understanding, the conceptual understanding of how to investigate the 5 aggregates. In other words, at this stage, one is gaining the right view, or samadhi, the right intellectual view regarding the 5 aggregates by way of the 3 universal characteristics. Then with the second stage, the teacher is explaining the method of investigating the 5 aggregates in the actual process of insight. What are the methods of investigation to be used so that one doesn't have just the intellectual understanding of the 5 aggregates as impermanent, suffering, and non-self, but how to look into and examine and explore the 5 aggregates in the actual process of contemplation with insight. And then the third stage, you could say that the word vipassitabhang, it's related, it's based on the verb vipassati. From which the noun vipassana is derived. And so it seems that at this stage, one is learning how to go from simply exploring the 5 aggregates in contemplation by way of the 3 characteristics. But now the teacher is explaining how to see more precisely and greater detail the 3 characteristics in such a way that the actual insight knowledges arise. Yeah, so that's my own interpretation of this. And then the rest of the sutta, you could just simply wrap it up. So the Buddha says that one who gains one of these qualities should go to the teacher and ask how one should practice to gain the other quality. The one who gains neither should seek out teachers who could teach both modes of practice, even if it means going to different teachers to learn different skills. And the one who develops, who already has both serenity of mind and insight into phenomena, should base himself or herself on both of those qualities and then make the further effort to gain the destruction of the asavas, of the taints. Okay, so maybe this should conclude our overview of these three suttas. And now let me get the participant list and you can see whether there's any questions. Okay, so we go in sequence. So we start with Chammi.
Thank you, Bhante, for teaching. I have a question on how to gain the moment of serenity in your mind when your mind is at crisis. I'll give you the scenario. I work with graduate students.
Yeah.
And the end of the semester coming, and I can see they're coming to the mind of crisis, and sometimes I'm coming to the mind of crisis because of this whole pandemic situation. What's my best advice for them as well as for myself to gain the moment of serenity in my mind?
I don't know what you can advise your students because their backgrounds and dispositions might be very different. But in your own case, what I would say is that it would be useful to have a regular meditation practice that you do daily, even if it's just, if you could do just 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the evening, or even just a half an hour, either morning or evening. So in that way, you get some familiarity. I want to just disconnect these headphones since I don't need them. Okay, so in this way, you get some familiarity with the practice of mindfulness and some skill in stabilizing the mind. So when you get into a crisis situation, then you know how to turn your mind away from the different factors externally that are agitating the mind and bring the mind internally and settle it upon a point of focus in order to regain your composure, to awaken your mindfulness. And then when you're in the crisis situation, since you have built up some strength through a daily practice, then it just takes a few seconds, even 20, 30 seconds, just to re-arouse that mindfulness. And then you can deal more effectively with the external situation. Okay?
Okay, thank you, Bhante. I think this one helps too. You said like wandering, stand still, sit down and settle down. And I thought this is something I can tell my students. Thank you, Bhante.
Okay, Sud.
Thank you, Bhante, for taking my question. This is sort of like a follow-up to the previous question. Much of the time for a lay practitioner is spent outside of meditation in contrast to maybe an hour or two in meditation. Is there any recommendation from the teachings for how one should sort of act while engaged in daily activities to sort of strengthen the power of concentration during one's meditation?
Yeah, the way to build up that power is to perform one's activities to the best of one's ability with, we use the expression sati sampajanya, mindfulness and clear comprehension. Since the basic skills that lead to the success of the meditation practice are, when you sit down to meditate, are mindfulness and clear comprehension. And so when you do things not in a very finely focused way in your everyday life, because if you do things with too fine focus, you can't really function very efficiently. But in a general way, you bring mindfulness, you keep some kind of awareness of what you're doing, and sampajanya, knowing what you are doing as you're doing it. And then that mindfulness and clear comprehension will continue through when you sit down to do the deliberate meditation practice.
Do you use the breath as the anchor while you're engaged in activities to help do that for the mind? Or?
No, I don't suggest trying to do that. because the mind will get just too tense trying to focus on the breath in the midst of one's,
Gotcha.
one's daily activities.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, but say if you're taking a walk, then you can focus, say, on taking the steps, not doing it in a very slow, deliberate way, the way we do it in the formal walking meditation. But when taking a walk, you could be simply aware of each step as you're taking it, right step, left step, right step, left step. But also you don't want to let the mind get too tense in your daily activities by always trying to keep that focused mindfulness in everything you're doing. Because then what I found in myself, my own experience, the mind gets tense. So sometimes you just have to let the mind relax. Okay, you're wrong.
Yes, Bande, my question is about the difference between samadhi and samatha. And besides the difference,
Yeah.
and besides the difference you explained to us today, is there any functional difference between the two terms as they are used in the text?
Well, let us say that it's the practice of what's called samatha bhavana, the development of a meditation subject conducive to samatha that will bring the state of samadhi. So there are a number of meditation subjects, some that I just mentioned earlier, like the in and out breathing or the kasina, that are considered samatha meditation subjects. And so when one practices developing the mind with those objects, that is developing samatha, the sort of settling down or stilling of the mind. And when that succeeds, then it brings samadhi. So samadhi, you could say, is the culmination of samatha practice. At least that's the way the terms are ordinarily used.
Thank you very
But
much.
there are also, I just want to continue, that there are kinds of samadhi that develop through the practice of the dry insight meditation. So through the dry insight meditation, when the mind is observing the changing bodily and mental phenomena through continuous mindfulness, mindful observation, the mind becomes settled upon the changing stream of experience in a state of samadhi. So that's what we call the momentary samadhi.
So are you suggesting that it's possible to have samadhi without samatha?
I would say that the term samatha maybe is fluid enough that we could say that through this practice of simple mindful observation, one is gaining samadhi. From one angle, you could say you're gaining samadhi without doing a formal practice of samatha bhavana, without a deliberate practice of intending to gain samatha. But I would say that that mindful observation of the changing phenomena brings along a stilling or settling of the mind, which is also a kind of samatha that culminates in samadhi. So I say that the term samatha is, well, actually both samatha and samadhi are flexible enough so that one could explain the relationships between them in different ways, depending upon how one is interpreting those terms.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, we'll take Vinyu.
Yes, thank you for taking my questions, Bante. I have one question in respect of the Adipanya.
Yeah.
Just now you mentioned briefly about the Four Noble Truths. It's so, I mean, intellectually, I do understand what is the Four Noble Truths.
Yeah.
My question is that in relation to the sequence of the Noble Truths,
Yeah.
we have the dukkha, then craving, the third cessation, then the eightfold path. My question is that why does the cessation come as a third noble truth and not the fourth noble truth? Because that would be the end of the suffering. And the eightfold path didn't come into the third noble truth.
Yeah, I think logically what you say is correct, but I think what the Buddha wants to point out, sort of the Four Noble Truths are arranged strategically rather than logically. So with the third noble truth, he wants to point out, yes, it is possible to reach the end of dukkha. And then the fourth noble truth, he explains the method to reach the goal. Okay. It's like a physician diagnosing an illness will first determine, can this illness be cured? Then when he determines, yes, the illness can be cured, then he prescribes the medicine for curing the illness.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Can I ask one more question, or is?
I see that there are about 5 other people, and my time is running low, so we have to give everybody a chance.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. So Suki. Suki.
Yes, Bhante.
Go ahead.
If I wanna hear your lecture again using the recording, where do I have to go?
It gets posted on the website of I'm sorry, the YouTube channel of Zhuang Yen Monastery and the Buddhist Association of the United States.
Is it immediately after the lecture, or do I have to wait?
I think probably by Monday or Tuesday it will be up.
Okay.
Jason
Thank you very much.
takes care of that. It takes sometimes, if he's busy with other things, it'll take him a day or two to get it up.
Thank you.
Okay, Panyadeepa, is that a venerable Panyadeepa?
Thank you for giving me a chance to ask questions, Bhante.
Yeah.
You're talking about this training of Cetto Samatha,
yeah.
And regarding this Chittang Santapitabang and Santisatetabang, could it be like referring to the Vitakka and Vichara? That the first one would be like applying the mind to the object, and then later on settle down the mind. This will be the Vichara. And the third one, Ekotikatabang, it could be Ekakata, the one pointedness of mind. Those are all jhana factors.
Yeah,
that's put it this way.
That's an interesting observation. I never thought of it from that angle, but it seems to be the case that in Santapetabang, there the function of Vitakka is probably very prominent, right. And maybe with Sannisidi-tabang, maybe Vichara. The function of Vitakka, if it's still in the pre-jhanic level, still Vitakka will be present, but maybe the Vichara becomes more prominent there.
Right.
It's an interesting thought. I never thought of it from that angle, but it might be the case.
Okay. Thank you.
Dayani? Dayani?
Oh, yes, Bhante. Good morning. My question is about the Kasinas practice, Bhante. Can we do Kasinas ourselves, or we need a teacher too?
I would not advise doing Kasina on one's own. And this is what I've heard. I don't have experience doing much Kasina practice myself. But what I've heard sort of mature practitioners or experienced practitioners say that one shouldn't do it on one's own, because what can happen is that the mind starts projecting, let's say, its own mental constructions, projecting these mental constructions onto the Kasina object and start seeing things in the Kasina object. Particularly what I've heard in the case of some meditators, this would be male monks, who have seen images of like beautiful women coming out from the Kasina object and tempting them. And in the case of some other meditators, seeing frightening or fearful images coming out from the Kasina object. And so it's said that one should practice Kasina under the guidance of a teacher. But maybe that applies if one is doing the Kasina day in and day out. But maybe if one does, 30 minutes morning and evening, maybe there's no problem with that.
Right. Thank you very much, Bhante.
Okay, Priya.
Hi. Thank you, Bhante. Thank you, Bhante. My question is about what in the teaching you mentioned that for the insight training, like if to like acknowledge the thought and then it goes away, the weight of it goes away. I'm just wondering, like, can you elaborate on it? Because it doesn't tend to happen that way. So I'm just wondering, like, if you can elaborate on how, or something else more to it that I'm missing and not understanding.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Actually, I was just maybe dealing with that in a rather simplistic way, because sometimes these different hindrances can be quite stubborn and persistent, and so one has to use different methods in order to overcome the hindrances. I can't really go into detail with this now, but there's a useful little booklet that you could find if you search on Google. It's called The Five Mental Hindrances and Their Overcoming. It's a collection of texts compiled by my teacher, the German monk, Venerable Nyanaponika Thera, Nyanaponika, Nyanaponika. The Five Mental Hindrances and Their Overcoming. So it explains the different methods and strategies that are used for dealing with each of the hindrances.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay. On phone?
Thank you, Bhante. My question is for a beginner like myself, doesn't have insight and doesn't have samadhi.
Yeah.
So I heard that in the Majjhimana number 37, the 37 aid to enlightenment.
Yeah.
Is it recommendation for a new beginner for me to focus meditation on that 37 aid to enlightenment? Sutta number 77 in the
Yeah, the 37 aids to enlightenment, those are not subjects of meditation themselves, but those are the factors that contribute to the meditation. So what I would say is that what you do is use as the basis the first of these, that is the 4 foundations of mindfulness. So those we could say are the 4 domains, objective domains for the practice of meditation. And of those, the 4 foundations of mindfulness, the main subjects or approaches that are used would be the mindfulness of breathing. And then you can also include the practice of the walking meditation. Yeah, we'll probably deal with these in greater detail as we go along.
Thank you, Bhante.
Okay, I just have time now for one more question. So we'll take August.
Pandami Bhante.
Okay.
I would like to ask, can someone still in jhana states practicing insight on jhana dhamma, or should she or he emerge from the jhana first?
The way it's understood within the Theravada tradition, to do insight practice, one has to emerge from the jhana into a state. It's a state of samadhi. The mind is concentrated, but it's not completely absorbed as in the jhana. So in that sort of semi-concentrated state, then one can investigate the factors of experience, or the 5 aggregates, in order to gain insight.
Or how could it happen, Bhante? Some people still believe that they can do the insight in the state of jhana.
I don't know. To me, it doesn't seem feasible.
Is it related with the Bhante explanation on vipassana jhana of Bhante before mentioned about vipassana jhana in the
that's not referring to doing insight within the jhana, but that is an expression coined by, I think, U Pandita Soyador or Mahasi Soyador to indicate that in the deep stages of insight, the mind is very strongly focused upon its object, but it's not a real jhana, not the same as the samatha jhana.
Okay, thank you, Bhante.
Okay, well, we're going to have to end now because I'll have to go up for the meal. And so let me end with the sharing of the merits. I'll just recite on my own. And so we're going to share the merits with the devas, the nagas, the fair spirits, asking them to protect the Dharma and to protect ourselves and the world. Akasata Tribhumata Deva Naga Mehidika Punyantang Anumoditva Chirang Rakantu Sasanam Akasata Tribhumata Deva Naga Mehidika Punyantang Anumoditva Chirang Rakantu Desanam Akasata Tribhumata Deva Naga Mehidika Punyantang Anumoditva Chirang Rakantu Mang Parang Pavagupadaya Vichi Hetato Etantare Satakayu Papanna Rupya Rupicha Sanya Samino Dukkha Pumuchantu Pusantu Nibuting. And then we end with three bows. Okay, we do bow one.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you, Bhante.
Three.
Thank you, Bhante.
Okay, so thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bhante.
Okay.
Bhante
Okay.
always
Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you, Bhante.
Be well.
Thank you.